I scream, you meme.
Hey everybody, welcome to I Scream You Me. We are on camera for the first time ever, hopefully successfully this time. You'll be able to see our beautiful faces. I'm Ben, and with me as always is the multi-hyphenate, multi-talented, incredible visual artist, musical artist, comedian, JD. You know, on the East Coast they talk a lot about Jay-Z, but on the West Coast we'd be like, I don't know who that is. I only know JD.
I don't know. Oh, he has a Jay-Z has the triangle thing. I need my own.
You need a symbol, but it can't be Illuminati. We can't open
Unfortunately, we are not in it yet. We're not big name podcast Illuminati figures just yet, but we are getting there.
that. No. Joe has not responded to my emails yet. I know eventually we'll get there.
We're almost there, Joseph. We'll get you.
We'll get you. Very short man apparently, but I don't want to open the Joe Rogan height conspiracy theories that are out there.
I feel like if I say it, it'll be completely fine because I'm 4'11". I have the short people, creds.
Yeah, for sure. Short king
Short king
status
status right here. From one short king to another.
Game recognized game. Yeah. So how's it going today, JD?
A pretty okay day. I meant to ruin this entire podcast episode by starting it off by eating ham and cheese, but unfortunately,
I saw you eating a hot pocket before we started recording.
you squinted. But unfortunately, it was it got turned around and ruined my day. It's just a regular pepperoni hot pocket, so it was very unpleasant.
Just the best hot pocket.
Okay, whatever. I'm working on it.
My dad weighed in on the hot pocket conspiracy or the controversy.
Let's do it.
And he said that he enjoys ham and cheese as a combination. And then I asked, have you ever eaten a ham and cheese hot pocket? And he said no. But I think conceptually he's with you.
You know what?
So
thank you so much. Because your dad also came through with the first listener question, which, I'm pointing to the sky right now, y'all.
yeah, so within the next month, I'm going to try to get him to eat a ham and cheese hot pocket, and then we can have him report back.
Oh my God, yeah. I need to get more people on the ham and cheese train because I can't just be like, it's wasteful to be on a train and just be on there yourself. Got to think of the environment.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think like logically, like other people must be eating them. They've been being made for a long time. They're still being made.
Thank you so much.
So you can't be the only one.
I can't be the only one. They're also making the Philly cheesesteak one, so.
I prefer the Philly cheesesteak one. That's gonna be the hill I'll die on. Is that I think that's better.
It's also like, can it be called a Philly cheesesteak if it's not being made in Philly? That kind of thing. That's the thought. So Ben, is that the hot pocket hill you're gonna die on?
Pretty much, yeah. So like flavor wise, you're totally down with it. You're like, this is an authentic Philly cheesesteak. Aside from the fact that it's not produced in Philadelphia, that's the only issue really. Everything else is perfectly fine.
Wow. Okay, I feel like that one is a little bit more contentious than the ham and cheese one.
I don't know. I feel like at least it's a big swing with the Philly cheesesteak. Like they took a shot. Like ham and cheese, that's what you get on like an airplane. That's what they serve you.
Oh my god! I won't stand for this, but I will be. I'll deal with it. I'll get my constituents. We'll get on that.
We'll get that. Yeah. Defend your Spirit Airlines. Quality,
shut up.
Taste
whatever, I'm not listening. But in order to grow our constituents, we must produce content. What is our content today, Ben?
Our content today is two spooky creatures, if you will, monsters, a monster mash. Potentially.
Ooh, yes.
Yeah. I'm bringing a online presence, and you're bringing someone who's got a little bit more history, but is still with us very much today.
Yeah.
Right?
So I'm stepping out into the real world just for a second. The internet loves this person, the being.
Yeah. So do we want to get into it? I'm down to start first because I feel like mine's a little bit more nebulous and internety.
Yeah, and yours is going to be brand new and interesting. So.
And then we'll get into the real.
All right, let's do it.
Alrighty. So JD, I'd like to start with a question. As a creative person, have you ever done an exquisite corpse as an exercise?
No, I don't know what that is.
So an exquisite corpse is when you like work with a group of people and you each kind of create like a figure. Usually it's like an art thing where it's like somebody will draw the head, somebody will draw the legs, somebody will draw the body, right? And then you combine it all together from these separate, disparate parts to create a being that is supposed to kind of capture the essence of all the works and combine them in a cohesive way.
Ooh, no, the
So,
only thing I know that is like the monster bashing on like the kit bashing DIY crafting people. Like they'll do something similar to that, but I don't think it's in that same realm.
it's a fun exercise. I've definitely it's kind of gets you. It's interesting to see how you often do get something that is kind of cohesive and does fit together, and stylistically a blend, but it will work usually. So it's kind of like it goes back to like surrealist art practices to get you in touch with your unconscious, that kind of thing. So we're gonna come back to the idea of an exquisite corpse later, but let's start with a description of our main character here. Standing 6 feet tall, deathly skinny with pale, clammy skin and sunken dark eyes, you might think I'm talking about myself and lying about my height, but I'm actually describing the Rake, the cryptid known for stalking suburban neighborhoods, feeding on nightmares, and tearing people apart with the long, sharp talons that give the creature its name. Given the Rake's height, I'm classifying it as a ghoul on the Ice Cream You Meme height chart of terror. I want to take a minute to do what pretty much every YouTube video on the Rake does and break down the legend. While evidence for the Rake dates back to the 12th century, the first written account of the Rake comes from a mariner's log in 1691. And here's where we'll put in the sea shanty music. He came to me in my sleep. From the foot of my bed, I felt a sensation. He took everything. We must return to England. We shall not return here again, at the request of the Rake. The creature came up again in an 1880 Spanish journal. I have experienced the greatest terror. And then he said that 4 times. I see his eyes when I close mine. They are hollow, black. They saw me and pierced me. His wet hand. I will not sleep. His voice. Unintelligible text. A suicide note in 1964 made mention of the Rake, ending the note with, Dearest Linny, I have prayed for you. He spoke your name. And the Rake really crept into prominence in 2003 when a series of sightings in upstate New York started to gain media attention. But shortly after the first reports, there was an apparent media blackout, and the existing coverage was destroyed. It seemed that all evidence of the Rake was suppressed. Almost as if the government didn't want us to know about the Rake. The Rake did not break its cone of silence again until 2006, when a woman, also in upstate New York, posted about an encounter she had with the creature. The post detailed her experience, waking up in the middle of the night and seeing, at the foot of the bed, sitting and facing away from us, there was what appeared to be a naked man or a large hairless dog of some sort. Its body position was disturbing and unnatural, as if it had been hit by a car or something. The creature stared at the woman and her husband for a couple of seconds before quickly crawling towards the husband, pausing mere inches from his face. It paused before running toward their children's rooms. By the time they chased down the creature, their daughter was badly injured. The father, on the way to the hospital, accidentally drove into a lake, killing them both. The daughter's last words were, "He is the Rake." The story was never published in the local news, and the police provided the woman with no answers. The woman claimed that after several months, she was able to uncover stories of other people's encounters with the Rake. She learned that the Rake could speak, and would visit the same people repeatedly. With this information, the woman set up a noise-activated recorder in her room, and within 3 weeks was able to capture the voice of the Rake, though she said she was too scared to transcribe or listen fully to what it said in the recording. These are fun stories, but you know what the show is. And before I get into the real history of the Rake, you know I need to nitpick some inane bullshit, so this is where we're going for right now. The creature is called the Rake because it has long fingers. Personally, if I saw a 6 foot tall naked man with 10 long claws, I would probably not think of a rake.
No.
Because I feel like rakes have more than 10 little rakey bits. We also have a cultural touchstone already for a long fingered killer with a Freddy Krueger. I think that could be a better comparison there. So quick sidetrack on the topic of lawn care equipment. What do you think the scariest piece of lawn care equipment would be?
A scythe, right?
Okay.
Because I don't know, like it sort of is. It doesn't seem like it's like a. I don't know. The other one's like a rake, like a little hoe, like a little shovel, like completely fine. You could use them as like murder weapons, but there's something about the scythe that like you're standing there in the middle of like if you see someone standing in the middle of the field and they're holding a shovel, you're like, that's fine, they're digging something. If you see someone in the middle of the field,
it's kind of more innocent,
right? Like you're holding a scythe, you're like, I'm not. I don't mean to assume, but I'm gonna be playing it safe.
Yeah, nobody really uses scythes anymore, so why would you have one? Like even a machete is kind of like, okay, you're like chopping brush in your yard or something, but yeah, so I feel that. But obviously, I mean, statistically, the most deadly piece of equipment is a ladder. So, creamies, please make sure that your legs are stable and on a level ground.
Yes.
But going back to the rake, or conceptually rakes, they're a very old concept, but the modern rake that we see in stores that we buy is not the first iteration of that, right? Earlier rakes did not have the long teeth. They were more shaped in kind of an uppercase T, and they had very short little tines that were used for the actual raking. So the rake that was kind of the inspiration for the rake, which we know as a thing with long tines extending outward from a point on the handle, was only patented in 1929. So this is where my nitpick comes in, that this is probably an anachronism, because I don't know how a 1691 sailor would be able to associate a creature with an invention that didn't come out until like 300 years later.
I
right?
didn't even think about that. I literally wrote how to, because I know that I don't know a lot about the rake, but I literally put like, how do people make it so real-ish as a concept? And then when you pointed that out, now I'm like, what else is wrong and not real?
Right. So here's a couple. I'm gonna play devil's advocate here. Maybe it was just a coincidence. Maybe rakes, exist, and the rake exists, and it was like the name back before. And then option two would be that the tool rakes, the modern rake, the patent was inspired by an encounter with the creature, right? So that's kind of a big brain, galaxy brain idea right there. But anyway, okay, that's my tool tirade is over. Back to the actual rake. The rake is a fully baked cryptid, and the bakers were 4chan's B board in 2005. The thread where the rake was created was started with the post, "Hey B, let's make a new monster." And here's a post from that thread. "Alright, this is for the people who like the 3 eyes, no apparent mouth, pale skin one. Here's what we've got so far. Humanoid, about 6 feet tall when standing, but usually crouches and walks on all fours. It has very pale skin. This face is blank, as in no nose, no mouth. However, it has 3 solid green eyes, one in the middle of its forehead and the other 2 on either side of its head, towards the back. Usually just watches the observer, but will stand and attack if approached. When it attacks, a mouth opens up as if a hinged skull that opens at the chin, reveals many tiny but dull teeth. As the thread progressed, the idea of the rake refined down. 6 feet tall is good, humanoid, pale grayish skin, 2 large eyes on the front of the head because of trips, and nature, no nose, mouth that is slightly visible. Then opens on a hinge, hundreds of dull but not blunt teeth. Eats meat, genitals don't matter because interviews don't really talk about that. Seen in suburban areas, minding its own business, attacks when approached but mostly just stares at people, looks human enough to be able to disguise with a fedora and trench coat or similar. Because yes, a fedora is the perfect way to blend in. Here's the final revision from the thread. Approximately 6 feet tall, but seen crouching. Humanoid, pale. Grayish skin, 2 slightly larger than human eyes. No nose, mouth that is smaller than human, but when provoked or attacked, opens freely on a hinge down to the neckline, showing hundreds of dull, but not blunt teeth. Unknown origin, unknown diet. Seen in suburban areas, opens its mouth and widens its eyes when provoked. Attacks when approached. If not provoked or approached, just stares. It was less than a year later, in 2006, that the lore was posted to Something Awful by Brian Somerville. The post claimed to be the result of in-depth research into the history of the rake. The claim was that the 2006 research came from a group who was inspired by the scrubbed 2003 news reports. They allegedly found over 24 accounts of the rake. The post claimed that the group of researchers had found mention of the rake dating back to the 12th century, with the first written accounts coming out in 1691. So the rake, as it appears, was created in a 4chan post, and the 4 stories I told earlier all came from the same Something Awful post. There was no group of researchers finding arcane knowledge, and no series of government cover-ups. But shout out to Brian Somerville for making an excuse as to why there was nothing before 2006. Also, the most famous image of the rake, which is a trail cam image of the creature on all fours staring into the camera, is a hoax marketing image from the 2011 video game Resistance 3. Anyway, the creepypasta was posted, and over the years, the legend of the rake became a fixture of the online horror scene. Despite the established lore, there's also a lot of theories floating around about what the rake is. Some say that it was once human, but was cursed with immortality. Others say that it's an alien. Others say that it was brought into this dimension and is being controlled by Slender Man. And some theories claim that it did not exist before, but it was created by our collective unconsciousness. There's no shortage of YouTube videos dedicated to the rake, either repeating the original legends or claiming to show encounters. There's also plenty of videos about being chased by the rake in Roblox, and animations of the rake fighting Slender Man, Shy Guy, and various other creepypasta characters. The rake has even been name dropped on our favorite journalistic institution, Paranormal Caught on Camera, who promoted the idea that it was created by our collective unconsciousness. But because it is a known work of fiction, the difference between sightings and the lore of the creature caused some controversy among cryptid fans. On r/humanoid encounters, there are over 150 posts related to the rake. As I read through some of these posts, I saw a lot of replies explaining that it was a fictional character. I saw a couple of different reactions from the original posters, some of whom seemed gracious and relieved to hear that there was no such thing as the rake. But others, who claimed to have seen the rake, seemed to get defensive at the implication that what they had seen did not exist. The figure of the rake is still very much alive, and the fact that it is a creepypasta hasn't stopped the spread of the story. Here's a quote from a March 2022 post about the rake on r/humanoid encounters. Everyone knows that the rake is nothing more than a creepypasta. However, you cannot deny that people around the world are seeing and having legitimate experiences with this creature, or rather one that resembles the being in the stories, myself included. The post goes on to describe a friend's warning about a patch of woods near their house. I remember him asking me if I had ever seen anything strange on the large plot of woods across the street from his house, which, at the time, I had not. However, long before it was brought up, I always had a deep feeling in my chest about this plot of woods. My friends took out their phone and showed me the picture of the rake that comes up with any Google search, a very generic picture. I laughed it off as he warned me about the creature because I genuinely thought he was just growing marijuana or something in the woods and didn't want me to find it. I couldn't have been any more wrong. The story goes as you'd expect a rake sighting to go. The poster says that they saw a 6 foot tall naked creature with grayish white skin and long arms running through the woods. Again, I am 5'10" and I have an alibi. Whenever it was, I was not there. But the evolution of the rake is fascinating. We don't usually have the literal brainstorming session for a cryptid documented, but we know the phases the rake went through. I didn't come across any encounters that mentioned the rake's dream haunting, energy draining aspects from the original stories, but there are a lot of encounters on dark roads, deep woods, and backyards. There seems to be a trend to correct the rake sightings as either a crawler or a walker, moving away from the name brand to a more generic model. This correction reflects what I think is an important distinction, that the r/humanoid community does not believe in the rake, but they do believe that the term is used to describe a real phenomenon. The rake is not real, but they do believe that there are humanoid entities creeping around. One poster compared the rake and crawlers to ET and aliens. By their comparison, the rake is a fictional version of actual sightings of crawlers. I'd also like to note that there's a lot of times that if a post mentions a creature crawling around on all fours, the poster will be directed to post in r/crawler sightings. So if you see a naked monster crawling around your neighborhood, be sure to go to the right subreddit, or you can just send any story to us at icecreamumeme@gmail.com.
Yeah.
But I want to add a caveat. I think we should look further into crawlers in the future, but it's difficult to find when the earliest reports of crawler sightings were. The Fresno night crawlers don't make finding information on crawlers any easier. R/crawler sightings only started in 2016. So I think it's fair to say that the crawler is a relatively new category of cryptid, even if the sightings of the creatures that would be considered crawlers now has a deeper history. The rake, despite being an acknowledged work of fiction, is probably the best known creature in the crawler category. There are many more videos claiming to show the rake than videos that are claiming to show crawlers. I think this illustrates the importance of narrative and name in the spread of online folklore. Even though most crawler sightings do not match with the lore of the rake, the fact that the rake has a name and a backstory to go to makes it a more compelling creature. I'm sure that it can be disturbing and unsettling to see something that you do not understand, such as a gaunt, pale, naked body crawling around your backyard. At least that's what my partner tells me. But having terms and conceptual categories to make the unknowable a little more known is an important part of the processing of the experience. And because the rake is more recognizable than crawlers, because the rake has a backstory, a legend, and its own name, it is easier to come across information on the rake and to associate the rake with whatever it is you may have actually seen. I believe it is because of this narrative and name that the rake will continue to be the more common term to describe these encounters with unknown creatures. I find it interesting that the rake has a specific story or creation that has come to represent a larger category of cryptid. In part, I think this is because of the brain trust on 4chan's B-board, because the concept of the monster became more generic and more general as they workshopped it. It went from this three-eyed creature with no features on its face to the Greendale human from Community. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but there's a poll for one person.
Sounds familiar.
The rake was created as a blank slate, but every part of it was created intentionally, whether by committee or by a single poster fleshing out a backstory. But the creation of the rake only went so far as to root it into online folklore. The rake has changed, and it's separated from the original lore. Whether the rake or crawlers win out as the preferred term, the idea of a creeping humanoid stalking the margins of our neighborhoods has taken hold. So JD, I think with this story in mind, the history of the rake, this can serve as a primer for when we create our own cryptid. our own exquisite corpse. What do you think about that?
Oh, I totally wrote that down. I was like, based on like the process, could we like then use that process to create a monster like this? I wrote it down on a Wells Fargo envelope.
Yes. Okay, great. I'm glad we're on the same page.
Yeah, because I was like, if there's like this entire process that it's like the collaborative creation aspect of it was very interesting, and then like having this like step-by-step situation, we should 100% create a monster. Like, this is so cool.
I think this should be the next step in our podcast, is that we create our own cryptid and then the lore around it.
Yeah, but we have to pretend that if we're like trying to make it real, we weren't talking about it in this episode. It's just a hypothetical.
Right.
It's not us.
We can't break kayfabe on it. Like, we have to really keep up the appearance.
Yeah, it has to happen. But yeah, I think I really like this. I like the collaborative nature of it. I was, before you even like touched on it, and like I love that. I have a question and then you explain it. Love to see it. But it's like this thing that's been made up, and then like how does it explain, or how can you explain like people at a later point like seeing this and then like touching on the resemblance and being like, it's not real, but because of the human mind,
right.
Like you think of like different like figures, cryptids like all over the world, and how we would have a different name for it, and then sort of that thing, but it's all kind of like similar looking, and it's like for this thing to be made up and then like people seeing it IRL.
Sort of like how like there's like the Bigfoot and then like the Yowie in like Australia, or the Yeti in like North Central Asia. Yeah,
So
many names for a similar thing that may or may not exist.
That's awesome. And then also like I really like how you we're going on a similar thread here, because when you mentioned separation from the original lore and then going for like the importance of the name and like the context of it. I'm gonna talk about that later, so you can bring your little you can bring your mind to it too, you know.
I feel like we've created some exquisite corpses, because I feel like a lot of times we have like some synchronicity that we don't necessarily plan, but then it comes together and we're like,
our brains. Big brain.
But speaking of which, you want to get into your feature?
Oh my gosh. Okay. So, before I get started on this topic, I'd like to ask you, Ben. Yes. Mothman. What is your familiarity? This feels like such a easy question, but like, what is your Mothman familiarity? How did you get into it? What is your Mothman canon for the Ben? So
I think I was first introduced to the Mothman by like the Mothman prophecies. I remember my dad watched it when I was like a kid. And I remember like, you know, kind of like creeping around the apartment and like seeing little peeks of it and being like very scared of it. And then I remember hearing more and more about the Mothman and the legend of like, was it Point Pleasant, West Virginia, right? And the sightings, and then the bridge collapsing and him being kind of a portent of doom. So that's my general familiarity with the Mothman. And then I know that there are some contemporary sightings now in this decade, in this very moment. These are current events.
Yeah. Okay, so we have a very similar origin story for the Mothman, because I also started on that movie very similarly, watching it behind the couch, because I'm a big scaredy cat, and I just didn't like the aspect of it being this like large creature that apparently you couldn't really see that much, or like it was just like an omen of doom. And I was like, if I see that, I'm done. But yeah,
do we agree that the moths are creepy too? Because I feel like moths were definitely creepy.
Yeah, I don't like seeing like really close to like zooms on like insects, like that episode of like SpongeBob where they zoom in on the butterfly. If you do that for a moth, for me, you know what, they do some good work, but it's not for me.
And they move very erratically too. You can't trust the way a moth flies.
Exactly. So we have a very similar familiarity to it. After that, it came from like years of watching like random paranormal TV shows on like Discovery, Destination America, History Channel, the Travel Channel. And so you and I both know that's been covered up and down and all around. So my main thing on this episode was, how do you tackle something that's been done and dusted about 1,000 times on every paranormal television show, podcast series, or whatever else this exists? Like, I won't goof around. We all know the Mothman, especially if you found this episode because of your personal interests. So you're probably listening here and be like, what's new? What are you gonna say that like everyone's said a million times? So you know who it is already, so I'm just gonna cut it straight straight from the Folklife blog on Smithsonian Institute. Our friend Mothman's well-known origin story starts on November 15, 1966. After it stalks, harasses, attacks Roger and Linda Scarberry and Steve and Mary Mallet on Route 62. Linda Scarberry is a very familiar name to me. I don't know if that's like, if that name in the context of Mothman is like familiar to you at all.
Is she the one that got like chased in the car?
Yeah.
Okay.
So very much we all know what the Mothman looks like, but to make it a little bit more exciting, I am going to share the following audio with all of you. Ben, you can cut it into the show. I specifically did this to just spice up this whole thing and potentially, because I'm in my mind marketing, potentially grow our audience into the same individuals who consume Love Island. Because I'm trying to grow my Hot Pockets brand constituency, and I feel like they're the perfect individuals to help me cross the line. So I'm going to share my screen if I can, if I know how.
I think you can do
it. Just so everyone knows, we're giving a different bestie another try. The homie Craig is on vacation.
He's on leave. We are with Riverside.
Okay, so I'm gonna
not sponsor the show.
Please, Riverside. Okay, I'm gonna try and share a screen. Without further ado, let's go a little Love Island. Climate change isn't the only reason why it's getting hotter out there, creamies. Welcome to a new episode of the I Scream You Mean podcast. This week, a hot new bombshell joins us in the villa.
Hi there, it's me, Mothman. I'm 6 to 7 feet tall, maybe even sometimes 11 to 12 feet. People say I look like a bird or a man or a birdman. You might be asking, hey Mothman, if you're a Mothman, why do people say you look like a bird? Well, life can be funny. If you want to know more about me, you can find me in Japan, Pripyat, New York City, and so many other places, but mostly I call Point Pleasant, Virginia, my home. Come see me at the McClintock Wildlife Management area or the TNT area. Who knows, maybe our connection can be just as explosive. That's the Mothman, Love Island style. Love Island, I'm ready to pitch you a monster of the week dating show.
Yeah. I mean, we already got Chaz on there in Love Island US, so there's already monsters there.
Then I was talking to your partner about Love Island a couple of days ago. On like a thing that posted on Instagram story, and I was like, "Can I still do this Love Island?"
I loved that. That was incredible.
She was like, "Yeah, you can still do it." And I was like, "Thank you." But also, to get back to it, yes, what accent was that? I don't know who decided that. I don't know if you've seen the docuseries Chernobyl. This was very much like Chernobyl, where there was a single person. There was not a single person with a Russian and Ukrainian accent, and I'm not joking. If you've not seen it, Con O'Neill, the love of my life, is in there. He has a great raspy voice, but does not have a Russian or Ukrainian accent. You cannot throw a rock.
Are they all British?
Yeah, man.
Okay.
It was basically like if you cast me in that docuseries and you had to suffer me calling my wife Yelena and our son Dimitra for some hot dogs. It literally was. It was like the names. It was like the proper names, and then it'll be like some incredibly English person doing it.
They need like the prestige of the British accent.
Yeah, they were like, well, we couldn't do American accents. And also the accents would be so hard to understand. And I was reading that because I literally watched the first 30 minutes of the episode and I was like, wait, where's the setting? Yeah. I was like, alrighty. But anyway, just to spice things up, we're getting a little bit brand new. We're hyper focusing on the Chicago Mothman phenomenon, which apparently is an incredibly misleading name, by way of a documentary and a bunch of articles that I dove into, but also getting into a little bit of tea with paranormal investigator shenanigans and a little touch on research methodology. Might have to borrow Ben for some pasta punching upping. But to get started, we'll hang with Robbie Telfer on an NPR article just for a second as a jumping point, because this all apparently, even though I'm touching on the 2017 sightings up to 2017, we're going to start around 2011. Hanging out on Lon Strickler's site, Phantoms and Monsters, we'll find that the first sighting is of a man, and it's by a man and his wife out on 63rd Street and Pulaski Road. If you're from that area, you might know where that is. But I did a little Google Sheet thing for us that I'll include in our source post for this, which is like an episode timeline sheet and chart for every date that I could find from like a Mothman sighting map. That on this map, there was like 150 plus sightings in that area, and it was really cool. But because I was like, okay, so I'm looking at 2017 and 2011, how far does this go? It actually starts kind of 1999, so it's a little
Wow.
older than that. So basically, we're starting at a jumping point that most folks know about, which was relating to a couple that was taking a strategically placed photo of a statue where if you stand at a certain spot, it looks like the statue's thumb is its dick off to the side. And
Okay.
I know, it's like, come on. And I'll send the picture in a little bit, but whenever you stand at the spot, they're like, ha ha ha, let's take a picture of the statue's dick. But when the person was kind of like reinvestigating the photo, they noticed an unidentifiable flying object of some sort, whether it be a machine or an actual organic thing. So I'm going to send this picture to you because episode 7, because I would like you to have a look at this thing and let me know what you think for the first time that you're seeing it, and whether
Yes, please.
if you saw this in the back of a picture,
Open it. Oh, okay.
And let me know what you think. Like,
okay. So yes, I do see how it does look a bit like a dick. First and foremost, I hope the statue's not there because I feel like it's offensive.
Yeah, it's not there anymore.
Not great. Okay, that's an interesting shape. It looks kind of like a manta ray in the sky. Okay, interesting. Okay. Maybe like a glider or something.
There you go.
Cool.
Okay, so now that you've looked at it, we'll talk about it a little bit later in a bit. But for now, we're just looking at the evidence, not debunking or explaining. But 2011 had a few other sightings according to the map. But from the sightings map, it looks like there's like 7 specifically ish, and then 2 of them very weirdly happened near the University of Illinois at Chicago. Very specific. But now to get to the specifics of it, I'm going to primarily use a lot of the timeline information from the documentary On the Trail of Lake Michigan Mothman from Seth Breedlove of Small Town Monsters, with some interjections from the sighting map sheet. So, according to the documentary, the Chicago Mothman phenomenon was big news in 2017, but there's actually 3 separate canons for the phenomenon. Though we're looking at recent experiences, it's important that we chat about the 2017 sightings as our definitive jumpstart for the things we're going to discuss today. Not just in general, but for today. Not to say that this is like definitive start, but I've already established that it goes way back to 1999, and you'll find out even more that it's like a little bit more complex in a couple of shakes. So you're already aware of the 2011 sightings mentioned above. According to the documentary, these initially came to the Illinois MUFON, or the Illinois branch of the Mutual UFO Network, and then later launched Strickler from Phantoms and Monsters. In the documentary, these are mentioned as the first reported instances concerning the Chicago Mothman. When Seth Breedlove in the documentary talked to Sam Moranto, head of Illinois MUFON, and Jack Chavez, who is a solo paranormal investigator, they said it wasn't an actual sighting. So, according to the information so we're talking back to that photo that I sent, we had a look. Sam and Jack said it wasn't an actual sighting. According to the information on Strickler's post, the definition of a sighting is you're there and you saw it. Okay? So they were like, this is actually just like evidence at a later point, because the person noticed it when they were reviewing the photos and not at the time of taking them. The person didn't necessarily think it was like Mothman. They didn't see that and were like, oh my God, I've just captured a picture of Mothman. So they were like, unidentifiable. Maybe it's a bird or a bat, which is exactly what the person said. But now you might be wondering, why would someone report a Mothman sighting to MUFON? Well, like I said, the person didn't initially think it was Mothman. They were like, it's strange, unidentifiable. It's a UFO, right? So hence giving it to MUFON.
Sure.
In the documentary, though, Moranto did end up mentioning that upon examination, it was likely a kite. So I'm now going to hopefully be able to show you again a part of that clip, because it's really interesting in terms of like
some kite pics.
Yeah, I'm going to show you kite pics, but more specifically how they talk about it, because these are people who like legitimately believe in the Mothman, right? So they want to see the evidence, but the most important part of it is that when they see that evidence, they want it to be real evidence. So I want you to sort of pay attention to like the wording, how they talk about it, and all that stuff. And because apparently you can't screen record these things on my computer, I just had to take it off on my little phone. Ugh, and I hate it. But I'm not going to share it with all of y'all because you got to pay for it. And I don't know if they're going to be like, knock this episode down. So I'm going to share it.
Like a DMCA.
Yeah. So maybe this part of the thing is not going to be in the pod, the audio, but whatever. Let's do this. Share that. Okay. Yeah. So they're like, no, like when you said it looks like a manta ray. I was also, when I was looking up specifically what kite it was, I was putting like manta ray kite, demon kite, right? Yeah. That kind of thing. But so that evidence was scrapped because the MUFON immediately was like, nah, it's a kite. I don't care about it. But from that sort of sighting dismissing comes two different threads for us to follow, which is the suburbia / rural sightings and encounters with Mothman, and then the downtown Chicago sightings per the documentary. The characteristics of the city sightings are, according to the doc, apparently brief encounters that are not necessarily believable to them. The suburbia and rural sightings are more detailed from what's mentioned in the doc, which is people doing random daily business and absolutely like mundane shit, and then just experiencing a big fucking Mothman. An example of this is Paula S. from the documentary, who experienced Mothman while she was taking trash out on a regular morning in 2017. She described him as a 7 to 8 foot tall, hunched over, black in color thing that you couldn't see its eyes, and it was incredibly leathery. When it was apparently like making like really creepy groaning sounds and other creepy noises at her, and when it noticed her, it started coming at her, and she fucking ran straight back into her house. Sure, yeah. Right. And in the very, very strangely, in a horror movie-esque sort of way, one fun detail that she had was that she knew already from previous experiences that her house keys are fucked up and they won't go into the door as quickly as she wants. So in this moment, she was like, man, struggling. She was like, oh my God, this thing is going to kill me. And it's an absolute nightmare scenario, which was, if that happened to me in real life, I'm just going to stand there and I was like, well, Mothman's going to kill me right now, right? Yeah. As she got into her house, she called up her upstairs neighbor to go have a cheeky look at our guy. And sadly, the neighbor did not get a face full of the moth. City examples, though, go along the lines of like, I was standing there, I saw this, it was quick and swooped by. Very much like, ooh, in suburbia and the rural spaces, everything is much more slower. But then in the city, like everything's quick. We're city slickers.
Right, you get a little more time with the Mothman when you're in the country.
Mothman has a country preference. But yeah, one example of this was reported to Manuel Navarrete at UFO Clearinghouse, and it goes like this. Thursday night, an individual was walking to the train to go home when they noticed the following: a 7 foot tall bat-like creature on top of a light pole near the Harold Washington Library. It lasted for 6 seconds. It was probably scared away by a bunch of kids that took a flash photo of it. Unfortunately, even though we know that someone took a flash photo of it, there's no evidence of the sighting. They could not find those kids that took a picture of it.
Even Mothman is scared of teenagers. Yeah, that's what I'm hearing.
United in that feeling of Mothman crossing the road because he sees a group of like teenagers.
Yeah,
like
group teens. No.
You're gonna make fun of how tall I am. But anyway, obviously there's a difference between the type of evidence sourced from suburban and rural areas and city spaces because of like how quick people are in cities, how slow paced people are in suburbia and rural spaces, which is stereotyping them, but fine. All right. You might also notice by now, if you're familiar with the Point Pleasant lore of Mothman, that this is also very different from like the general feeling of a Point Pleasant Mothman. And that suggests something beyond, oh, this isn't the same Mothman. It's probably his like cousin, like Moth Guy. Like you said, kind of like separation from the original lore. So we're touching back on there. The documentary is interesting because it follows a cool line of questioning and ideas about the Chicago Mothman, which is later dubbed as the Lake Michigan Mothman by Tobias and Emily Whalen from the Singular Fortean Society. Because while a lot of it happens in like the Chicago area, it actually seems to come from the like Lake Michigan section, and it's just like traveling to there. So they're like, let's make it a little bit more general because it's not just Chicago. There's also like Wisconsin, or according to T-Pain, Wisconsin, right? This touches on something that Ben and I frequently encounter on the show, even on the same episode, which is like some sort of hijacking of narratives and like genre shifts, as pointed out by my absolute favorite person on this documentary, folklorist Eleanor Haskin Wagner, who was a PhD student at the time of filming and whose Mothman diss I did try to read, but did not finish for the show, even though your partner was like, don't read the whole thing, read by the chapters. I was like,
it's
right. So a majority of the stories in the Lake Michigan area have an aspect of mundanity to them. An encounter while you're taking out the garbage, coming home, or walking your like mom to her car and seeing her off to work. Haskin Wagner points out that Lake Michigan Mothman is just a teensy bit removed from the narrative of the Point Pleasant Mothman, who was deemed as a sort of, like we talked about in the beginning, like a harbinger of doom, sort of like this creepy omen of something, post the fall of Silver Bridge in 1967. Point Pleasant's Mothman is an omen, not a random encounter in the park, not a random encounter while you're taking out the garbage. If you think about the supposed appearances of Mothman in like Japan, in New York, in like Chernobyl, Mothman always preempts some sort of like terrible thing. Lake Michigan's Mothman, for the most part, is like out of nowhere, randomly while you're doing random things. The only thing seeing him was a sign of was like a terrible experience that you're gonna have to try and rationalize to whoever you're about to dump the story on.
Right.
One interesting note regarding the harbinger of doom aspect of the Mothman, something I learned from Richard Hatem, who adapted the John Keel OG Mothman researcher and writer of Mothman Prophecies. So he adapted the book to the movie that we watched. In another Breedlove documentary, the Mothman Legacy, Keel's book apparently only contained just a little bit of the aspect of the harbinger of doom. But Hatem was like, I love this. Let's blow that shit up. So my understanding of this is that Richard saw that little thread and went like, I'm about to unspool the shit and like let it go wild. So he kind of took that tiny little thing, like he's just only a little bit shows up at like times of like doom and destruction, and went crazy with it. So now we can kind of trace back to Richard Hatem of Mothman Prophecies the idea of like the Mothman is harbinger of doom.
So the Mothman could be like accidentally there, you know?
Yeah.
And like, oh no, the bridge fell down. Oh, they're gonna blame me for this.
Well, it's like, I'm at the wrong places at the wrong time. Like, I'm so sorry, bestie.
Unfortunate,
right?
yeah.
But if you created a sort of like Venn diagram of the Point Pleasant Mothman and the Lake Michigan Mothman, it would, from the documentary, look like this. On the Point Pleasant side, you have a significance to the town, the disaster aspect of it, and then later the omen-like nature of it. Then if you have the Lake Michigan one, which does have a sense of dread to it, but it's sort of like these quick interactions that are just like, I was here, so was the Lake Michigan Mothman, and this is what I was doing, and this is what they were doing. In the center, you would have the sort of descriptions that are like really similar. So what really draws them together is like the descriptions, the verbiage, and how people are seeing them. So if you really smashed them together, they kind of are similar. According to the documentary and Haskin Wagner, the moth idea was actually a later sort of thing. So while you and I are absolutely like, do not interact with moths, a lot of the OG experiencers of the Mothman actually refer to it as a bird. So really interesting there. While there are some variations in the Point Pleasant Mothman specific like experience and feature and look, there comes this sort of like unified idea and description of the Mothman as like this big, large black shape with wings, red eyes, right? So that's like a general thing. Right. I read through the like 150 plus sightings on the map itself, and it very much varied. So some people would say like for the Lake Michigan Mothman, it was like a winged humanoid, bat-like creature, crow man, giant blackbird, black bat, bat humanoid, gargoyle, which is very cool and interesting because that's like isn't that like a different sort of phenomenon in itself? Like people will see like a gargoyle and be like whatever. Then they have like they'll be like, oh, it looked like a demon, it looked like a phantom, it looked like a big owl, it was a shadowy being, it was a monster bat, it was a man bat, and a red-eyed winged being. So while they are sort of really different and sort of like what they're naming it, you kind of get the idea that like at least they kind of look the same, which is like a black mass that's creepy and has big wings. Haskin Wagner points this out really wonderfully, which I think helps for those who might see this description difference as evidence towards it not existing, right? Like, why don't people have a unified picture or look of it.
Sure. Why aren't they saying the exact same thing or describing the same
Yeah.
thing? Yeah.
So she says that people rarely have the exact vocab to describe a thing that they've never ever seen before, right? They might relate it to something similar or whatever they actually already know of. So someone describing it as a bat versus a large bird doesn't make it less real, but it makes it relative to what they can describe it as, right? I do highly recommend checking out the documentaries done by Breedlove and all the other articles that I cover for this, because it's really fun to follow. If you have the stamina, which I don't, you should read the discs, because I did make it to page 75 and then was like, let me just read the end.
Just hip hop,
Right. Shout out to Ben's partner for trying to find the article version of it for me. There was none, so she just gave me tips on how to actually read that thing. Yeah. Right. And then back to the topic at hand, though. Now that we're familiar with the Chicago and Lake Michigan Mothman based on the documentary and some other articles, let's get a little bit gritty. So I made the distinctions between the Point Pleasant Mothman and the Lake Michigan Mothman, but what does that exactly mean for us? What are the implications beyond the idea that this can mean that there's, like, much like Bigfoot, a large population of Mothman? Who knows? But it's actually, like, kind of close, like a suggestion of the growth of the Mothman narrative outside of its original space, specifically outside of Point Pleasant. As pointed out by Haskin Wagner, it's the story of Mothman removed from its origins in a non-negative way, but in a way that shows the story is growing and changing. From my brief understanding of this phenomenon, it's sort of like changing to suit the needs of the storyteller and the space and the time that they're at. If you consider some of the evidence where it occurs, you might notice some patterns, like I've mentioned prior to this. Each of them seem to serve a purpose and fit a narrative that can be specific to the moment or something. Not meaning that this person made it up for that exact moment, but they're experiencing it relative to what they're doing. Just like the naming conventions. They're not making it up because they can't be unified in the description. It's just relative to what they know.
Sure.
Yeah. Of course, there's some other things that, like, deviate 100% always. Some of the sightings on the map are like, I just saw it was standing there, blah blah blah. And then, like I said before, there was that woman who was, like, followed and attacked into her home. So there are instances of, like, the Mothman come in and attack someone, but it's like,
getting a little aggro.
yeah. It's kind of like the Momo bird and the Babadook. Like, there's an initial story of the author. This is their intention, and then, like, a shift in the narrative, and then everything else that follows suit again and again and again. The encounters, the body of evidence may not be exactly like Point Pleasant, but that doesn't mean or make Lake Michigan Mothman any less real, I think, because this documentary is like, they have it's a very sort of, when I was watching it, kind of like obvious bias as to which aspects of the Mothman in Chicago that they believe are real, and then the rest is like horseshit to them, which I was like, my preference of documentary is you not immediately telling me which part you think is horseshit, but I do like those kinds of documentaries where they come in and go, this part's horseshit, but let's examine the other things. But they kind of do it in like a strange way, because they they kind of pose themselves at some points as like the moral middle of it all. Like, look at these people who don't believe in it. Look at these people who do believe in it.
Yeah.
But,
you fools. Yeah. They're like centrist with Mothman. They're like,
they're both sizing the Mothman.
Yeah. Both sides are actually a little extreme for me. I don't know if I want to.
Like, both sides. One side actually takes the evidence a little too far, and the other one's just like, at this point, are you believers or skeptics? And they're like, actually, we just picked. I'm like, come on now, y'all. But speaking of picking and choosing on evidence, let's talk about how I got into this documentary and how I arrived at this line of analysis for like half of the episode. When I was first doing research into the Chicago Mothman, I was lured into this documentary because of an episode of Monsteropolis by Small Town Monsters that I found when I was just attempting to find video evidence, because, like, in the freaking recent episode 6 episode, I was not able to find decent evidence. I had to freaking vamp my way into telling you that I thought the Loch Ness monster was a ghost. You know, so I was like, I gotta go ham. Anyway,
there were some stretches.
Yeah, I was hoping to get some information on sources and where to get started with all of this. Like, what do we know? Like, what can I possibly do to this that's new and not repetitive? But what I came away with this on this incident was like pretty fucking cool, which was like Seth Breedlove, the documentary guy, while doing this documentary, actually caught some evidence of his own. Ooh, right? So on the podcast, he described it as such. It was 10 at night-ish, and he was on the street located at Congress Hotel where he and his team were staying. What he saw felt like a massive bird, and it was quick as it streaked through the sky. And to quote him, he said it was kind of like a large winged thing. So just to get like silly for a moment, do you say winged or winged?
Winged. I think. Yeah. Okay,
cool. Because
that'd be my.
Some people on here are like, it was a winged creature, and I'm like, at this point, who am I to know? I'm just never gonna say words out loud anymore.
I don't have a rationale for why. I just feel like winged sounds right to me.
That's also where I ran to. I was like
if you like hit something, you know, like there's like that thing. It's like, oh, I winged it, or like I did something like without preparing, I winged it. You wouldn't say I winged it.
I winged it. Oh, okay. That's gonna be my reason now.
That's my rationale there.
Okay. Anyway, the suggestion of Seth being able to capture video evidence actually got my ass. So my thought is like, Seth is a documentarian, so you know that his goal is to get evidence and explanations for things. I was glad that he experienced this, right? Because this is a dude who set out to go find something and is actually personally able to experience it, and also he's got good cameras, which we love, right? Because luckily enough for him, he stated that he was hoping to get B-roll for the documentary. So he had a pretty good camera on him, and it was like the perfect pics or didn't happen moment was just about to happen to a dude with a fucking good camera. Not a shaky iPhone, nothing like that. But once we get into the documentary, though, it takes a little bit of a different turn. So now, Ben, I'm going to show you the evidence, right? But before we get started, what are you expecting from the description I just gave you? So he was like, it was massive, large winged thing streaked through the sky. And it was at night. So what are you expecting from that?
Bird. Most likely. Bird or probably a bird if it's that close. Like if you're catching it on there. I think there's like owls. Owls are pretty big. I don't know if you've ever seen an owl, but they're larger than you think. Okay. So I'm now going to show you that same exact scene where he's talking about it, just sort of like prepping everybody up like, I have evidence, but okay, so we're going to go into that. Okay. So, what are your thoughts now? It's a bird. I mean, it looks like a bird. There's like a hinge in the back. It's a bird. Birds have joints. They have wings. That's how they fly. I've never seen something that was so like the prefacing it with like, it's probably a known bird. Don't show us it then. We don't need to see it. Like,
yeah. So definitely from the sort of description that he gave in the podcast episode where it got me really juiced. I was like, I'm about to see some of the best stuff. So it's incredibly far off from like what I thought it was gonna be.
Yeah, sure.
As far off as that fucking bird. My little believer's heart was like disappointed, but isn't that like the usual thing? Like as a believer, I kind of want and need that like crisp evidence to like absolutely rock me in my shoes. Cause like I'm seeing this and like you said, like it's probably a bird. And then if for a second you were like, oh, Mothman shifted into a bird. I'm like, but I need it to look exactly like how everyone is saying it.
Yeah. So I talked to you about like Monster Quest off mic one time. And how there's like episodes like Giant Hog, and there's one that's like Giant Bird. It's like a story about somebody being like kidnapped by a bird. And they had like a thing where they did like an experiment where they were like trying to get people to like guess the scale of birds, basically, or like kites, and nobody could do it correctly. Like based on image or seeing it in real life, everyone was like, yeah, that's probably like a 50-foot bird there. And like it was like a small kite it's just hard because like perspective, we kind of need things to like measure them against, and like that needs to be like close enough in context to guess the scale. So it's very hard to guess the scale of things in the sky, which complicates flying cryptids, I think.
Yeah. And then for me, like personally, I'm very bad at like measuring things. Like I know I'm 4'11". That's it. But
That's your baseline.
like if you were telling me that person who just ran across the street, could you tell me how tall they were, what they weighed, how like what's their age? And I'm like, you're gonna have to ask someone else, because I can't confidently like be like, oh well, that person was 6 feet tall, because I've done like the comparison height thingies for like myself and like, you know, celebrities, just because that's when you know you're dedicated, when you look up a celebrity's height and you think, how tall are they compared to me. So I was doing, love my man Taika Waititi, how tall he is compared to me, and I was like, I can imagine how tall 6 feet is. No, I can't. That man is fucking 6'1" or something. I was like,
oh okay.
No, he's tall. And then compared to the little picture, it was like this. I was like, absolutely not. Never. Tall people, you're done.
Yeah, so there's like a solid foot and some change between you and Taika.
Absolutely. So that's done. Just kidding. Anyway, so even as Seth, going back to the videos, asked when Eleanor, the love of my life, there she was standing. But anyway, she asked him to describe it to prior to him playing the video, which was like my absolute favorite part, because someone's like, this is the funniest video you'll ever see, and they show it to you and you're like,
cool.
Yeah. And he said, just like we mentioned before, he said it's more than likely some sort of bird, which kind of knocks it down for you. You're like, it's a bird. You get the sense that he was a little bit disappointed, and kind of when he shows it to them, he's like, I know I said I did see something, but I know it's bird. Right? And I deeply understand it, because like in the moment, I think he was probably genuinely, for a second when he captured it on that moment, he was like, I did it, I got the Mothman evidence. Because like the difference of what you see in person versus your camera, no matter how good your camera is, sometimes it's like,
right. So he called the people and he was like, yo, I just seen the craziest footage. Okay, I'm gonna work on this right now. And he's working on it, and he watched it, and then he was like, oh, they're gonna come and they're gonna realize this is just a bird. Oh, sorry.
It's a bird. He blew it up, had to look at it. His heart fell just a little bit, and he's like, oh, it's just a sandhill crane, isn't it? Right? And
my boy.
right, I felt a little bad for him, because like when he was talking about it on the podcast, I was like, hell yeah. Right? Oh, and then I got to it, I was like, damn, Seth, I'm so sorry. If that was me, I'd be crushed. I wouldn't even talk about it.
No, I wouldn't bring it up. I'd be like, I'm just gonna delete
I would
this.
tell you, Ben. I'd be like,
yeah,
I swear, Ben. I swear this happened.
Yeah, our listeners are not gonna find
They're
out.
not. We're not. I'm going to pretend I found this evidence on Reddit and then lost the link, and I just be like, guys, I found this evidence. Not sure what it is.
Yeah. That's when you like, well, actually, it turns out the Mothman messes with technology. So even though I filmed it, it got destroyed because of the Mothman energy.
Right.
So
I was too excited. Blah, 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 blah. But yeah, though in the video that he does state it's human size, like we said before, like it's hard to like kind of parse out that kind of thing. Yeah. Right. Seth in the video points out that the bird was already far off from the building. So if Seth is right, based on the distance and size of the building and the windows near it, it was a huge fucking bird. I'm just going to say it's not Mothman. It's a huge fucking bird. Right. You might argue like maybe it is Mothman, but like, at this point, most of the people, I think even the people who believe it, might say maybe it's not. Right.
It's a bird. Yeah.
So we're going to get a little bit interactive for all the people listening, all of our listeners, especially the 1% in UK, and even Ben. So put that drink down. While I was watching the documentary, I even decided to test out how fast it would be for me to open the camera app on my phone. Like, I'm pretty quick. Okay. I'm savvy. Ben, don't get your phone right now. Don't even touch it. Okay. I'm looking. You're already like 5 feet away. You're already looking. Okay, so I'm pretty quick, savvy on the phone. I have the camera app on my main screen on the side where my thumb hangs out, and I even have like a take a photo shortcut on my phone. I have the premium opportunity to be quick, and I was able to get the camera app open and take a photo in like seconds. But I also remembered like a day before that, I feel like I talked to you about this, like my neighbor's dogs ended up in our backyard, and they were like barking at my cat, and I was in complete shock. So I was like, I'm gonna get evidence of this. But first I was muttering, you have to be fucking joking. You have to be fucking joking. Yeah. And then like I stared at it for a few seconds knowing I should get video of this before pulling out my phone and trying to record. But it was dark and I was recording through a window, so I was like, I'm gonna go to the living room where I can actually see them. and get a good video of it. And then by the time I got to the living room, the dogs were already like pretty far away from the sliding door. They were in the darkness and I could see them with my eyes, but not with my phone. And then the second I hit record, apparently recently I took a flash video. So the flash turned on and all I could see was the screen door. And I was like, oh, I'm never getting these dogs yelling at my head, right? So like, like what I'm trying to say is that I did so good when I knew I was gonna do it. Like I was like, yeah, I can do it in 3 seconds. But in the moment of needing to get these dogs yelling at my cats, I couldn't do it. So what I'm saying is that you and I could probably argue that we can pull up the camera on our phone fairly quickly because we know what it is in normal situations. Yeah. So let's try it out right now. Ben, don't get up. Okay. I'm gonna count to 10. But somewhere in that countdown, I'm gonna yell, take a picture. Don't get your phone right now, right? Okay, keep your phone where it is. If it's in your hand already, to people listening, awesome. But if it's on a desk somewhere charging, cool, keep it there. Again, I'm gonna count to 10, but somewhere in there, I'm gonna yell, take a picture. So we're gonna start. Okay, Ben.
If you're driving and listening, do not do this.
If you're driving, don't. If you're driving, don't do this.
Just
please.
Listen. Yeah.
Just listen to like the sort of noises Ben's about to make and the absolute laughter I have. Okay, so I'm gonna count to 10, and then somewhere in there, again, I'm gonna yell, take a picture. So I'm gonna start. 1, 2, 3, 4. Take a picture. 2.
Come on, open app. Okay, boom, picture. How long was that?
13 seconds. Mothman is gone, Ben. You failed the podcast. I saw Ben like blur out of the screen, right?
It was on my bed. I had to go to a different part of the room.
I see excuses, but you couldn't get a picture of Mothman. If there was a werewolf outside of your window right now, Ben, you'd have failed the podcast. I'd have seen it.
I'd have missed it.
Wait, no, we have Riverside going.
We're recording right now, so we would have it. Yeah.
Anyway, so for you listening, how did you do? Did you do well? Participation time. If you know how that went for you, hit us up on Twitter. I scream you mean pod or Instagram. I'd love to see what you ended up taking a random photo of in those 2 seconds. And once again, I swear to God, if you were in your car and you did this, I'm so mad at you right now. So what happens when we're in the moment? I can't even get straight serious pictures of our cats on our belly because like the second I move, they kind of move too. So like, did you have to run out of your room? Did you have to close a bunch of apps and like suddenly forget where your camera app is? So like you went through that. It took you 13 seconds, Ben. And then you might then argue that like Seth's a documentarian. He should be quick. Should have gotten it faster since he's already got Mothman on the mind. Well, me and Ben watched the video, but you're not going to watch the video because we don't want to take down of copyright situations. But Seth explains it as such. It was such a quick moment that by the time that he got the camera up and recording, it was like mad far from him. Additionally, framing choices, lighting issues, and you know what? I get it. You can say one thing and do another, and it's just all a little too quick, and you're never really prepared for this kind of stuff. So, and you're also like probably fresh from listening to our face value episode where we did actually watch people get video evidence of creature sightings. So I know what you might be thinking. Then how the fuck do the people on Paranormal Con camera do it? I don't know. Yeah. I don't know.
Professionals. That's how they
right?
do it.
Like, just to be in the like Paranormal Con camera Dropbox to see what comes in through there. And like have to parse out all of like the bird videos. Then we need to get in the Dropbox in some way or another. But now that we've talked evidence, you might now be asking like what the hell these people are like taking photos of. For the most part, people are saying terrestrial explanations per the documentary and just in general. Non-living, non-organic examples might be like kites, really far off aircraft, and other shit. There were some on the Phantoms and Monsters like sightings map where if you go to one of them, someone will like write an article about it and kind of debunk it as like this place is known for having like airplanes, things. This person might have like misidentified it or just have never been there before, so they see that and they're like UFO or Mothman, right? So for terrestrial living options, people will say sandhill cranes / blue herons and very large owls. So according to the Illinois Department of Natural Resources, this is how they describe a sandhill crane. Keep the description of the Mothman in your mind. Sandhill crane averages about 40 to 48 inches in length from tail tip to bill tip. The bird has a wingspan of 6 to 7 feet. A red patch can be seen on the top of the bird's head, extending to the back edge of the bill. The feathers are gray in adults and brown in immature cranes. The crane has long legs and a long neck, and the feathers over the rump stick out in a bustle. For me, some of the key things on here are the 6 to 7 feet, the feathers in the gray adults, and then brown, and then it has long legs and a long neck.
Right. And the red, right?
And the red. So that could be explained away.
The red eyes.
If you see this thing at night, if you see a gray adult at night, it's got 6 to 7 feet wingspan. If you think about Seth's evidence, kind of, you could take the sandhill crane and place it in there, and you're like, it's probably a sandhill crane situation.
Sure.
I remember some of the paranormal shows when they like try and debunk or try to figure out what the Mothman is. They'll go for like an owl, because especially the reflection of lights in its eyes might make it look red or some stuff like that. But in videos, in some of the videos, actually, when people argue that like, oh, the legs are blah blah blah, it's got a long neck. According to the Chicago Audubon Society, in flight, you'll actually see their dark legs trailing behind, and their necks are kept straight when they fly. So you could argue that's just what you're seeing. Like, I'm so sorry. If you think of the ones that mention like the Mothman looks like an owl, it could just be an owl. There was one show, I don't remember what it was, but they tried to recreate like the very, very first Mothman attack in 1966. They did like a forest situation, and they stuck out like owl cardboard cutouts with red eyes and stuff on them. And they also, at that point, they were trying to see how like reasonable it is for people to say like that thing was 6 feet. So like what you said, they did an owl cutout, and they were like, okay, you drove through that. How tall do you think that owl thing was? And some of them came up with really too large sizes. But and then later, like, suppose if you look at a map of the sightings and then tried to connect it with like the Wildlife Illinois description of bird coverage in the northern Illinois part, especially in like marshy areas of it, if you kind of I feel like I sent this to Ben, if you kind of like superimpose them, there's a very large portion of the sightings that coincide with the places where
parks of natural areas.
Yeah, so you could argue then that maybe a majority of those sightings in that area are just misidentified birds, right? Especially if they're like long distance sightings as opposed to the ones that are like, it attacked me, it came up to me, and all that stuff. And additionally, you might even consider the fact that the O'Hare Airport Mothman humanoid sightings, when hearing that sandhill cranes are actually attracted to open areas, meaning that they can pose a nuisance near airports.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. So from the same source. And then like, you're like, oh, are all of them birds then? I don't want to say, because it's like the most buck wild of them all is just like, what if Mothman's just real? And, you know, like the Loch Ness Monster, it's a ghost. You know, there's like a different explanation for it. What if what if Mothman's a shapeshifter, right? I can be a bird.
Mothman can be a bird.
Bird, plane, and all that stuff. But now the
plane. Wait, hold on. You think the Mothman can turn into a plane?
Ben,
Mothman has no. Yeah, you're right. Mothman has no limits.
No limits. If I can argue that the Loch Ness Monster is a ghost, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna argue that the Mothman's a plane. You don't know the lengths I will go just for this.
That's right. Keep your eyes on the sky.
Keep your eyes on the sky. You don't know. You just don't know. That weather balloon, that hot air balloon, it is 2022. Mothman has been around for a very long time. You don't know if Mothman just like upgraded. Drones? Mothman. Okay? Anyway, with all that out of the way, with all the sensible stuff out of the way, one particularly interesting draw of this documentary that further drew me into this whole thing was the absolute apparent from this documentary boiling tea about paranormal researchers and hunters embroiled in this whole thing. So Ben, you and I aren't free from all this tea and drama. We frequently name drop Susan Slaughter, our beloved theater kid turned ghost experiencer and interdimensional icon. We jokingly, out of respect, we love her. She's getting that back. We jokingly auditioned for Paranormal Caught on Tape. I have outright said at one point that you won't be attacked by vampires. I'm so sorry, everybody. The drama that would exist here is that like Ben and I could hypothetically be like believers that lean in too hard into like jokes and almost not believing in all of this. Someone could confront us and say like, do you really believe in all this? Are you like just cashing in on the paranormal stuff? None of this like joking around and discrediting really says that we believe in some of this, and to that I say sure. Like for me at least, just to be honest here, I do believe like a bunch of the sightings could just be like misidentified birds and like weird very far off planes, but I also think like some people might be seeing something that's like absolutely insane and something that I can't fathom. I'm here and there, I'm like everything. I still haven't seen the movie. I'm everything everywhere all at once.
Everything all at once.
But like when you talk about Mothman to me, like I'll follow you into the idea that this is a random creature that maybe we've never experienced before, and it like exists like a biological thing. Where you might lose me is like it's like interdimensional, ultra terrestrial, alien. Like don't get me wrong, like aliens, yes, but like is Mothman one? Like I'm in the part where it's like Mothman could be like a living like thing. Like Ben, what's your
it's kind of
what's your thoughts?
It's like a hat on a hat to be like, you know, like that's the thing with a lot of the paranormal things. It's like, okay, Bigfoot exists, but Bigfoot is actually a paradimensional or interdimensional alien that is communicating to the other alien. It's like the Greys or the masterminds, and it's like you don't need to connect everything. Like it's okay if we just have like Bigfoot is Bigfoot. We don't really know what it is, but it's out there. Or like Mothman, we don't really know what it is, but it's out there. Or like I think like the crawlers. I'm open to the idea that people are seeing like these like gray naked guys crawling around neighborhoods, and we don't know what's actually going on with that. But I don't think it's necessarily connected to like Slender Man. So that's
like it might be a cop out to be like, well, I do think it's out there, but I can't really explain it to you. But like sometimes that's all I can stop at, because I've never seen it. I've never experienced it. I don't know how to explain it beyond like it exists, like I guess, right?
Yeah. I think it's like if we're trying to prove the existence of something, going to like the explanation for it seems like you're kind of jumping the gun a little bit in terms of like, well, okay, let's start with just saying, okay, this thing exists before we're like, this is what it is. This is what it's trying to do. This is why it exists. That's my read on it.
Yeah. Agreed. Ben and I are in the same camp on that. But yeah, how does this drama talk though relate to like the Lake Michigan Mothman? Well, Seth Breedlove and Heather Mosier, who are in this documentary, the main hosts of the documentary, speak to Tobias and Emily Whalen from the Singular Fortean Society, Lon Strickler of Phantoms and Monsters, Sam Aranto of MUFON, and Jack Chavez, who is a solo investigator. And by the end of the documentary, you can see the grouping of ideas and rifts that exist between these groups. There's the party that believes that the Lake Michigan Mothman exists and all instances are factual to the best of the witnesses' abilities, but there's a party that believes that this exists in general, but some of these are just exercises in creative writing. They're all believers, but just like what I mentioned above, they branch into like levels of belief, choosing of lore, and who's into like what. This sort of draws several circles around the groups of people who are ready to believe every single story that they hear versus the ones that are more critical versus the ones that are so critical they seem to not believe in the Mothman anymore. This creates some infighting when it comes to being like the one to prove it, right? Hence the race to find and report on Mothman sightings, the race to discredit someone because they won't share evidence with you, and the race to just call someone's information completely made up and even say that it's a hoax. So let's look at Lon Strickler, who is in the camp of I'm gonna believe everyone. The post is called very wonderfully Daily 2 Cents, Strange Sounds and Lost Time. Be wary of who you help. Man rigged front door to electrocute pregnant wife. And Robbie Graham's interview with Alison Jornlin, Mothman Problems, an interview with Alison Jornlin. I do not have time to unpack that first title, but we're going to stick to the part that says be wary of who you help. Stick with me. Okay. So it apparently all this drama-ish apparently started when Alice and Jorlin began to question the validity of evidence put forth by Lon Strickler at the time, because he was the major source of all the information. He's the one who made this map that has 150 plus sightings. Right. She questioned the sources, the evidence, and with the input of Sam Moranto from MUFON, who's a little bit like you saw in that video, like he's in a suit. He's like, I'm a professional man. Right. They came to the conclusion that most of the evidence was made up. And this is why. Okay. Jorlin says, MUFON Sam Moranto has revealed to me that a significant amount of the reports came from the same IP address and cited weather conditions or moon phases in accounts that do not line up with the facts. I've also discovered inconsistencies in witness statements compared to what I saw at the locations. Jorlin mentions going to the locations as she's a Chicagoland local and realizing that as she was trying to match things up, evidence didn't add up. Why would this be here? Why are you talking about this location's like feeling like this? And along with all of this, one of the things that she was really like caught out for and was really like picky on was like that Lon Strickler was hesitant to share witness information. In the doc, Lon says that he's doing this out of respect for the people. Like at this point, if I'm sitting here trying to be like, let's be reasonable, I kind of get both sides ish. On both sides, I'm being a centrist, right? Okay. Within reason, from one or the other. Yeah. I guess that like I would be like that too. Kind of like anonymity, confidentiality is something that's important for folks who like provide evidence in instances like this, right? You kind of sometimes some people don't want to be known as a person who like saw Mothman, right? Mothman, yeah. For like definition, let's explain the difference between either one. Ben and I are probably really familiar with this, and so are you, but let me just hammer it in. Anonymity is when the researcher doesn't collect any personal information from the person taking part in the thing. There's no information that can be linked back to you. Example, email, phone, address, blah, blah, blah. Confidentiality is when the researcher conducting the project has the information about the participants, but the researcher does their best to make this information does their best to make sure that this information isn't accessible by anyone else. Strickler knows people, so he's not using anonymity like he says. He's doing confidentiality. He's like, I'm protecting the witnesses as a because they don't want to be like known as the person who saw the Mothman. They have a job that's like, oh, if you saw the Mothman, people are gonna like question you and say you're weird. Like he's like he's using that as a reason to not share this information, and in turn Jorlin is saying that's not real. You're making this up. You won't share this information because it's made up. And then it circles back because Strickler is like, nah, I can't share this because people don't want me to share this. And then again, Jorlin is like, because it's fake, bro.
Yeah, sure. Okay, that's interesting. That's a real loop.
Yeah. I got there. And then with all of that, like a lot of times Jorlin in like Lon Strickler's article of like be wary of who you help, she's seen as like acting in a way that's like unbecoming of an investigator. She's questioning the sources, demanding information, which is like a no-no because apparently it pushes her to skepticism instead of being a believer. The way that she's demanding information on the people just to check up on them, he's like, you don't believe in this, you're a skeptic, you're just, you want to be valid in the way that you're asking about all these sources, but like you're not listening to me, right? So that's like their back and forth situation where she's like, I want to know all this evidence, and he's like, no. I'm protecting these people. And then we have Sam Moranto, who is in sort of ish the Jorlin camp, putting forward the idea that Seth Breedlove, who did this documentary, actually him and his team are responsible for the 2017 sightings. That's what he's saying. He's actually in the documentary and he talks to Seth. So he's face to face with this guy who he was like, you made this shit up. right? And then Moranto says that he thought Seth was doing guerrilla marketing for the documentary by making up the 2017 sightings, because the 2017 sightings coincide with the 50th anniversary of the very first Mothman sighting.
Sure. Okay, that makes sense.
He doesn't say it unkindly to Seth's face. He kind of says like, I understand if you're doing like guerrilla marketing. It's actually pretty smart. He's like, it's important to kind of like reiterate that Sam is on the same team as Jorlin when it comes to some of the evidence. He outright says that the evidence was contrived. beautifully said. He was like, it's all contrived. It's like an exercise in creative writing. And I was like, damn, dude, he's not pulling the punches. And he sort of asks, like, he's the leader. He's like the head of like the Illinois Mutual UFO Network. We know what MUFON is. We kind of, if you're in the like paranormal space, you know what MUFON is. Like, they've got places everywhere. He asks, like, why aren't people being more critical? You're faced with all this evidence, and all you do is, okay, sure, like, no corroborating, no following up, just like, okay. So Sam Jornlin and then Jack Chavez, they're not down with that, because they're like, why wouldn't you want to question these people? Like, if you're a believer, wouldn't you want like the real evidence? Wouldn't you want to go so deep into it that like you actually find out that it's real, right? So if you take note, if you take note of who's on whose side, it's the Sam Jornlin Chavez, who are like, I see this evidence, but also I really want to question it so much because I really want to find out the truth. And then there's Tobias, Emily, and Lon Manuel with the UFO Clearinghouse that are like, let's take in all this evidence, let's kind of do some following up, but also like I do believe that these people had an experience and they saw something. And then, like I mentioned before, when it comes to centrism, there's Heather Mosey, Seth Breedlove, and my light and darkness, Eleanor Askin Wagner. I'm so sorry, I still haven't finished your dissertation. The three of them, more so Heather Mosey and Seth Breedlove, because Eleanor, she's like a folklorist. She's more in the space of like, I'm providing information. I'm not placing myself in a specific party, right? Heather and Seth, they place them narratively in the happy middle of all of this. There's Team A, who's so critical to this point to the point of skepticism, which is like Jornlin and everyone else. There's Team B, willing to believe most of these things without question. Then there's them, Team C, who's like willing to believe but also willing to question, but knows that shit is freaky. So they're the centrists. Right? I think I don't know where I am in all of this. Like, even though me and Ben just talked about like how we believe in these sorts of things, so that's where I am. Just kidding, I do know where I am. Like, I don't know where I am, but like mostly I'm on page 70 of Eleanor's dissertation, sort of hallucinating through it. There's like, there's pictures at the end, like from like Tumblr pages and like explanations of how people are like down to smash Mothman, and I was like, Eleanor, I love you. I do, with all of this being said from the documentary, it very much says like there's three parties, look at all this fighting. But I did some like external research because I don't want to just parrot this information. I do want to step out and acknowledge the thread from Tobias Wayland on Twitter, who is posed in this documentary as someone who just outright believes everything and everyone, right? So he says on Twitter, I have a good working relationship with Samaranto, who's on team investigate all, question everything. And he says, we communicate about the investigation regularly. He says, all that. He's like, we're completely fine. I don't know why this documentary is making us like the fucking enemies, right? In this thread, Tobias clarifies some things that like you may have gleaned if you watched it, which is like the issues with Allison. He says they're more of a professional conduct and a personalities clashing thing. We didn't kick her out because she asked all these questions. It was just like she was kind of like conducting herself in a weird way, and all that stuff. He says later, like, I'm perfectly capable of working with someone who I disagree with because I'm an adult and I can conduct myself like a professional. Right? So then I'm like, damn, is this for Seth? Is this new tea that you're like, you're like, you pose this can't, because if you watch a documentary, it very much like creates little teams like without anything, like they don't talk to each other anymore because blah blah blah. But anyway, now that we're done with that, let's just touch a little bit on research methodology. So this is not me stealing Pasta Punch Up that Ben did a couple of episodes ago. I've just named you. I've given you a group, which is the BRB, the Ben Review Board. I'm just vibing to questions. I won't ask. I'll let you do that within reason. Ben is the review board. I can't. Right. Outside of the anonymity confidentiality thing that we talked about above, let's talk about research methods. An interesting thing noted by Haskin Wagner is the methods of research these investigators use. Particularly, some of them don't have direct experiences and rapport with the folks that they interview, so they're not as embedded and culturally aware of what goes on around the locale. Primarily, it seems that research is done through phone calls, emails, or methods that are not necessarily on the groundwork. I guess, like, if you think back on like Mary Hire in Point Pleasant, who is actually living in Point Pleasant and knows everyone. She's as embedded as one could be. Though it's obvious that some of these investigators did travel to the sites and talk to people, they still have some particularly lacking in experience when it comes to like rapport and cultural knowledge. Something in the doc, someone noted in the doc that Lon Strickler, someone who was like the name that people go to when it comes to like Michigan Mothman, he's not on the ground. He's currently located in McSherrytown, Pennsylvania. I probably said that wrong. At the time, they noted that he hadn't been to most of the locations since like 2017. So anything coming after that,
okay,
it's just he's getting it through someone there, but he's still like the big name.
not directly.
Right.
Yeah.
So like Ben, because you're the BRB, like when it comes to like a thing like this, like these kinds of investigations, how would you conduct something like this? And like what is your personal take on like how, like maybe in general, how some of these people would do like an investigation of these things, which is like talk to people? Like we've seen so many paranormal investigation shows. Like, do you have some sort of like critiques, or like do you think there's parts of it that you're like, I'm down with that kind of thing? What does the BRB think?
I think that, yeah, so in terms of just how you're gathering evidence, you don't want to necessarily push people when you're interviewing them. You don't want to kind of force them into saying something they may not say of their own volition. That being said, you also don't want to necessarily take everything they say at face value and repeat that as the full truth. So I think there is kind of like, again, that centrist middle ground that we're circling around. You want to be able to find like evidence you can corroborate. You don't want to force people to say anything. You don't want to ask leading questions that are like, so you definitely saw a Mothman, right? So yeah, it's definitely a mysterious creature, you'd say, right? Like you want to kind of let people say what they're going to say. And then I think in terms of corroboration, you can kind of turn to outside sources, right? You can see, oh, did anybody else see it? Did anybody else experience this, right? You want to kind of build as much as you can a holistic view of what may have happened, I think.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah, because we do our you do your tons of research and all that stuff. I think I'm like pretty removed from like the actual on the ground space researching. I am firmly in the land of looking up things online for now. So, but yeah, to touch back on the issue, at some point of it, I can kind of understand like now not everyone can afford to conduct face-to-face interviews, or some subjects just don't want to go out there and like do this, right? Like maybe like a lot of the people who are doing like in really intense paranormal like investigations like for like podcasts and all that stuff don't necessarily have the ability to go back over there. And I think that's the cool part of like the internet, where like you can look up information and get to know a whole lot of things, right?
That's what we do.
That's this. Well, yeah. Pointed out by Ben and Tobias. At in some points, like you sometimes you don't want to ask like further questions to like just pull certain things out of people. You don't want to like force information out of people. You don't want to lead them into certain questions. And then in the clarification thread above on the essay, but also mentioned previously, folks may not want to come forward or retell their experiences due to like a perceived stigma and a level of trauma from the event itself, right? So maybe the excuse of like only emailing with these people is because maybe it feels much better for them to write it out as opposed to talk it out, because it could be an emotional thing. And then again, like the confidentiality thing, like maybe you have a pretty like job that relies on people not questioning your stability as a person, where they're like, do I really want to trust someone who has seen Mothman, who's saying they know about UFOs and all that stuff? So I think that online and on the phone and digital research is cool, especially for like accessibility and distance reasons, folks who cannot travel for monetary reasons, physical reasons, or any like other reason, right? So we know from the past 2 years that travel can be limited, and this may have changed the course of like several research opportunities, but also in some cases opened them up to like more online and digital interactions. This whole thing can also like be solved in a similar vein to like Mary Hyre and John Keel's interactions, where Mary was on the ground, she had a rapport with the folks, knew of the locations, she was a journalist in Point Pleasant, and then John Keel utilized this to the best of his abilities. Like, you know, the John Keel wasn't there 100% of the time, and he used Mary Hyre as like someone that people can trust, tell their very unique stories to, and then Mary could validate and be a judge of those people's characters because she's like heavily embedded. Mary and John are the happy medium. Just like ethnography is wild. I've had experiences with this as like a particularly shy and non-confrontational person when I had to study like the diversity and interactions between folks of different cultural and racial backgrounds in our city for an urban social class. And I kind of like struggled, like for me, in spaces where like I knew this was like people I've never met before, and I'm like, It's hard for me to ask for boxes at restaurants. I'm not gonna interrupt. I'll be like, hey everyone, I want to look at you and see how you interact with the fellow people. But yeah, the questions about their research methods, while understandable, I also like, both sides, centrism. This is the centrist episode. but
centrist podcast.
But yeah, in conclusion, a new way to tackle the Mothman thing is not just to get new evidence and to look at it from that point of view, but also like looking beyond the creature itself and then examining the people behind the creature, right? So not the people who are like, when I say like people behind the creature, I don't mean like people who are hoaxing it, right? But the people who are responsible for spreading the story, helping the lore grow more and more with every sort of revelation they make. So the long-standing lore of Mothman in Point Pleasant is interesting. But with every new revelation, there's growth in story. And even if it's shifted out of the Point Pleasant Mothman like canon, that doesn't make it any less interesting. Also, research is hard work, especially in something that folks might not even believe in to be real. Like you as a paranormal researcher might have to like parse out through so much information to get what you really need, or might not even have that information. So you're like standing on the shoulders of those who have looked down the void tunnel and came back with a Bigfoot toenail or ass cheek print. So that's where you are. So that's it, Mothman, let's get it.
That was incredible. Wait, one second, let me pull up the soundboard.
Hell yeah, baby.
It goes on for 40 seconds, but you get the idea, right? I'm very supportive here.
But yeah, that was that made me sweaty.
No, that was awesome. So I think that's a very interesting question in terms of the paranormal research space, such that it does not have the same kind of concepts for what makes research valid. So the way that that's kind of being figured out within like the Mothman community is very interesting in terms of like they're kind of figuring out their own like standard of their gold standard of research and what makes something like a research grade experience with Mothman versus what makes something non-research grade. And I think that's a fascinating thing to kind of have to figure out, because they're building their own kind of field of research there.
Yeah. Like especially when you watch stuff with like Josh Gates on it and like all the stuff that he does, which is like pretty like grounded-ish research on like sorts of things that like, how do you exactly research people seeing dinosaurs in the desert? Like what is the point of that? Like how do you try to make something appear that apparently only appears at certain points of time to have like a very predictive way of researching that can be like repeatable, recreated, that kind of thing. So like you said, you have to sort of build a new thing off of like existing research methods, but also like apply it to UFOs, ghosts.
Yeah, it's like the process of making the information that we kind of repeat and spread, right? Is like it's not through the channels that we may think of, where like being something being like in a journalistic institution being published, that doesn't necessarily mean as much in the paranormal space as it might if it was, like a scientific finding, right? Like this is a different standard of evidence that people kind of feel and think about, right? Like, because I think part of it is that the paranormal is not supposed to work on the same rules as the rest of the world, right? When it is like, I want to go to this thing that's like a ritual thing, and it's going to be the third midnight in the month on the full moon or whatever. You're not doing that because you think it's going to interact with it like in a scientific way. You're doing it because it's like a ritual thing or like an otherworldly thing, right? You don't expect it to conform to the same kind of rules that things would, right? So that's kind of like the difference in thinking between like the scientific thinking and like the kind of more magical thinking of the paranormal, right?
Which what makes it which really makes the ghost hunting field really interesting to me in terms of like when they create like technology to like measure certain things, right? Like the like measuring like EVP, like what's the difference between just like random sound and then like all that stuff, and then like the magnetic fields, like what does it mean when there's like high
the Ovilus, all these devices,
right?
Oh, is that the Connect, the thing? Was that the one, the camera with like the little the little wiggly eyes?
Expensive as fuck. Like how do you apply like things that you would use to measure radiation on the field of something and then apply that to like
because there's high levels of this, that means there's going to be high levels of this. There's going to be ghost activities and all that stuff. So it's really interesting when people are like engineering technology that worked for here. Now I'm going to like place it in the space of like paranormal. So that's really interesting in terms of
Yeah, we make this into they're making their own standard, right? Of like this is what this means. This is what the EVP meter means, and we've decided this as a community. And I think that's kind of like an interesting thing to see that with the Chicago Mothman sightings, is that it's not set in stone what qualifies as like a standard of evidence yet, right? Like there's not like the same thing with ghosts where they're like, this will measure the levels of Mothman activity in this area or whatever, right?
Yeah. Research is crazy.
Yeah, it's a difficult task to undertake, and full respect to all the Mothman researchers out there. I think you're all doing fascinating things.
Shout out to my future wife, Eleanor. The second I'm getting done with your dissertation.
Yeah, you'll be tagged in this episode. I'm sure. So
right. But yeah. Well, that's that. That's Mothman. That's the rake. I really do think that like we should one of these days, special episode creating a monster, but like we would have to do it after we create the monster. After the monster is real.
Yeah, that'll be our exquisite course. I think.
And I
drew
a picture of the rake. It's not.
Ooh, let me see. Can you get a little closer?
Get a zoom on that.
That's pretty good. That looks about right. Yeah, I'll send you. You've seen the rake pics, right? I didn't share anything.
Yeah, I was like, this is like the cute version.
That is a cute rake. Yeah.
Might get that tattoo.
The rake is kind of like salad fingers. Is what I was thinking a lot.
I was thinking of like how scary the rake looked to me, and I was like, it looks completely fine. Like, but if you show me like the Shy Guy, you're done. You're done, me.
Yeah, the Shy Guy was way creepier. Yeah. I think the rake is like also like from those original posts. It doesn't really want to do much. It kind of just hangs out and like crawls around, kind of minding its own business. And I don't really mind that. You know, like if you're gonna be weird in my neighborhood, that's fine. Like
you can just be like, going out to walk the dog today. There's the rake. Hey.
Yeah, I live in Portland. Like nudity is illegal here. Like you can, as long as you're not aroused, you can be naked in public. So it's kind of like none of my business. Right? I'm not gonna. All right, you crawling around on all fours. None of my business. I'm not gonna.
Maybe protect your skin from the ground if it's hot.
Yeah, and wear sunscreen. Yes. I think that would probably be important. But again, it's not my place to tell you what to do. But for your own safety, you might want to invest in some high SPF.
High SPF. Maybe like. You know, the barefoot thing where it's like you could go barefoot, but there's like a little sticker under your skin, under your foot to kind of protect it from all the rocks and all that stuff.
What?
Ben, oh my God, this exists, and it will be in the Instagram post for them when this episode comes out. But it's like maybe invest in that to put on like maybe your elbows if you're crawling on the ground.
That's fascinating. Tips. Yeah, and I think thinking of the rake, and then like all those like that TikTok girl that like runs on all fours.
Yes.
She's basically the rake. Like that's I think real life. About as close as we're probably gonna get is like people that can like run and gallop.
I may have seen the same exact person like jump over like a bench table thing, and
that sounds like it. Yeah,
it's wild out there. But yeah, that's it. That's Mothman, which I tried to be new, and then the rake. We're gonna be keep an eye out for our monsters.
Yeah, coming eventually when we get around to it.
We won't tell you.
No. And it won't be associated with us necessarily.
Yeah,
so when the new monster drops, when you know, you know. But
yeah, if what is the thing? If you know, you know, and it's like the IK.
If you know, you know.
YK.
If IYK YK.
Ikik, everybody.
You feel it? All right.
All right, let's get this started. Let's get that Love Island voice. Just kidding. Not the Love Island voice. This episode was written and produced by Ben and JD. For all our sources, please head to the website in the description below if you'd like to reach out with a comment, suggestion, or share an experience with one of our topics today. If you're the rake, if you're the Mothman, if you're a Mothman researcher, send us a message at icecreamumeme@gmail.com. All the music for the podcast is provided by Jaeger Frank. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll catch you on the next episode. Bye.